Chapter 22 Vamana, Three Steps and a Universe. King Bali was extraordinary. He was the grandson of Prahlad, that great devotee, and he had inherited something of his grandfather's character. He was generous beyond all measure. In his great sacrificial arena, he had pledged, "Ask and it shall be given." No one who came to Bali empty handed left empty handed. The Devas were troubled. Bali had conquered the three worlds through his virtue and his power. He was not a tyrant, he was a magnificent king. But the cosmic balance had shifted, and Vishnu moved to restore it in the most unexpected way. He came to Bali's sacrifice as Vamana, a dwarf Brahmin boy, barely reaching to Bali's knee, carrying a wooden umbrella, his face shining with an intelligence that did not match his small form. He asked for only 3 paces of land, measured by his own small feet. Bali's Guru Shukracharya warned him urgently, "This is no ordinary Brahmin. Do not make this promise." But Bali, and this is what makes him a hero rather than merely a king, looked at his Guru, looked at the small boy, and said, "If this is Vishnu himself come to take from me, then I am more honored than I have ever been. I will not take back my word." Vamana grew. He grew until he filled the earth. He grew until he filled the sky. With one step, he measured the earth. With his second step, he measured the heavens. Then he looked at Bali. "Where shall I place my third step?" Bali had nothing left to give, nothing except himself. He said, "Place it on my head." Vamana placed his foot on Bali's head and pressed him down through all the worlds to Sutala, a realm below the earth that is, paradoxically, more auspicious than even the heavens. Because Sutala is where Bhagavan himself stands as doorkeeper. Bali lost everything, and in losing everything, he gained the constant presence of Bhagavan. The Bhagavata calls this the highest victory, to have the Lord as your guardian at the door. Chapter 23 The Dynasties of Light. The ninth skanda traces the two great rivers of human lineage from which dharma has flowed across the ages, the Solar Dynasty and the Lunar Dynasty. These are not merely genealogical records, they are a map of how dharmic consciousness has been carried across time, from king to king, from sage to king, from mother to son, across thousands of years. Before we enter the great dynasties, the ninth skanda gives us one of the most beloved bhakti episodes in the entire Bhagavatam, the story of Ambarisha and Durvasa. King Ambarisha was a sovereign of extraordinary devotion. He had offered his entire kingdom, his wealth, his body, and his very self to Bhagavan Vishnu, and lived as a king only in outward form. He had observed the Ekadashi Vrata, the sacred fast, for an entire year, and on the final day of completion was about to break his fast with a sip of water when the volatile sage Durvasa arrived as a guest. Ambarisha waited with folded hands. Durvasa took his time bathing in the river, so long that the auspicious moment was about to pass. Ambarisha took the water sip so as not to break the vow without eating, not to be inhospitable but to honor the vrata. Durvasa, enraged at what he took as slight, released a terrible fire demon from his matted hair to destroy the king. The Sudarshana Chakra, Vishnu's own discus, which stands as eternal protector of his devotees, instantly appeared and began to chase Durvasa himself. The sage ran through every world, to Brahma, to Shiva, finally to Vishnu, who said with the most extraordinary statement, "I am completely under the control of my devotees. I cannot override my chakra. Only Ambarisha himself can withdraw it." Durvasa returned and fell at the king's feet. Ambarisha, who had not moved, had not prayed for vengeance, had simply waited, immediately prayed for the sage's protection. The chakra withdrew. The teaching is absolute. Bhagavan protects his devotees even from the anger of great sages, and the true devotee, even when attacked, holds no grievance. The Solar dynasty gives us the lineage of Ikshvaku, of Harishchandra, that king of absolute truth who lost everything and would not speak a falsehood, of Sagara, whose sons dug the ocean in their arrogance, and of Bhagiratha, whose extraordinary penance brought the Ganga down from heaven to liberate his ancestors. And from this same Solar dynasty came Lord Rama, the avatara of Vishnu, who would become the ideal of every human virtue. The ninth skanda gives us the story of Rama in condensed and luminous form. His birth in Ayodhya, the 14 years of exile, the kidnapping of Sita, the building of the bridge across the ocean, the battle with Ravana, the return to Ayodhya. The Bhagavata presents Rama not primarily as a political or martial hero, but as the embodiment of Maryada, the principle that dharma is not merely rules, but a quality of being that holds its shape under every pressure. The lunar dynasty gives us the lineage of Yayati, who had to beg the youth of his sons to recover what his own pride had lost. It gives us the line of the Yadavas, the clan into which Sri Krishna would be born. But the ninth skanda also makes a subtle and important point. Every dynasty, however brilliant, eventually declines. Every king, however righteous, must yield. The solar dynasty ends. The lunar dynasty's greatest members destroy each other at Kurukshetra. This is not pessimism. It is the Bhagavata gently withdrawing the props of the world so that the reader, like Parikshit, can be ready for what comes next. Not a dynasty, not a king, not a lineage, but the Lord himself, born in a prison cell at midnight. Midnight birth. The tenth skanda begins in darkness, the darkness of a tyrant's prison, the darkness of midnight, the darkness of a world held hostage by fear. Kamsa, cruel, paranoid, absolute in his power, had imprisoned his own sister Devaki and her husband Vasudeva on the night of their wedding upon hearing a divine prophecy that Devaki's eighth child would be his death. He had killed Devaki's first six children with his own hands, one by one, as they were born. The seventh, Balaram, was secretly transferred to another womb. The eighth was coming. On that night, the sacred Krishna Janmashtami night, the Ashtami of the Krishna Paksha of Bhadrapada, a night the cosmos had been waiting for since the beginning of this age, the heavens prepared. Shankha, Chakra, Gada, Padma, all the divine weapons, descended to guard the moment. The constellations aligned. A fragrance filled the air that had not been felt in any world before. The prison guards fell asleep. Every lock in the prison opened by itself. Vasudeva looked at the newborn child in the darkness and saw, not an infant, but Bhagavan himself in his four-armed form, wearing yellow silk, the Kaustuba gem on his chest, the Srivatsa mark on his left breast, eyes like lotus petals, a smile that contained every word. Devaki folded her hands and prayed with tears flowing down her face. Please, she whispered, become an ordinary child. Kamsa will kill you if he sees this form. And Bhagavan smiled and became a baby, crying. Vasudeva wrapped the child and lifted him onto his head. The prison doors opened, the guards slept on. The Yamuna, in full monsoon flood, parted before him. Shesha, the divine serpent, spread his hoods as an umbrella against the rain. A baby cried in the darkness, and the universe held its breath. Across the river in Gokula, a girl had just been born to Nanda and Yashoda. Vasudeva made the exchange. He returned to the prison with the infant girl. When Kamsa reached for this child to kill her, she slipped from his hands, ascended to the sky, laughed at him, and spoke. The one who will be your death has already been born, Kamsa, and he is safe. Darkness had given birth to the light of all lights. Chapter 25. Putana, Trinavarta, and the serpent Kaliya. Vrindavana received its gift without knowing what it had received. To the cowherds and cowherding women of Gokula, Krishna was simply Yashoda's beautiful, mischievous, inexplicably delightful child. They did not know he was Bhagavan. They loved him, purely, without theology, without calculation, as a neighbor's child, as a friend's son, as the most charming baby anyone had ever seen. Kamsa sent his agents to find and kill the child. Putana was the first, a demoness who could take beautiful forms. She came to Gokula disguised as a radiant young woman, found the sleeping infant Krishna, and put her breast to his lips. The breast was smeared with deadly poison. Krishna drank, and drank, and when he had drunk the poison and the life from Putana, the demoness fell with a thunderous crash that shook the earth for miles around. In her death, she was liberated. Because she had given the Lord her breast, even with poison, even with murderous intent, the contact was enough. The Bhagavata is very precise about this. The Lord purifies even those who come to harm him. Trinavarta, the wind demon, came next, sweeping Krishna away in a whirlwind. But the infant's weight suddenly became immeasurable, heavier than all the worlds. Trinavarta could not hold Krishna and could not release him. He was crushed. The most celebrated of these early encounters was with Kaliya, the great serpent who had made his home in the Yamuna, poisoning the river with his venom until the very trees on the banks had died and birds fell from the sky. Krishna jumped into the Kaliya pool. A great battle followed. Then Krishna climbed onto the serpent's hoods and danced. The dance of Krishna on Kaliya's hoods, every depiction of it shows Krishna in absolute joy, arms lifted, anklet bells ringing, while the serpent rides below. The demons' wives prayed for their husband's life. Kaliya surrendered. Krishna instructed him to leave the Yamuna and return to the ocean. The river ran clear again, the banks bloomed. And Vrindavana understood, without being able to articulate it, that something had come among them that made the world possible. Chapter 26. The Butter Thief and Brahma's Illusion. The butter stealing stories of Krishna in Vrindavan are among the most beloved in all of Hindu devotional literature, not because they are grand or cosmic, but because they are so completely human, so warm, so full of the comedy and tenderness of ordinary domestic love. Krishna and his friends would plan their raids with military precision. They would stack each other up to reach the butter pots hanging from the ceiling. When that failed, they would eat whatever was reachable and distribute the rest to the monkeys. When caught red handed, Krishna would stand before Yashoda with butter in his mouth, butter on his fingers, butter on his cheeks, and deny everything with the most luminous eyes she had ever seen. Yashoda once tied him to a wooden mortar as punishment. The name that came from this episode, Damodar, he who was bound at the belly, became one of Krishna's most beloved names. He then dragged the mortar between two Arjuna trees, and the trees fell, liberating two divine beings who had been imprisoned in that form since a curse of Narada. But the 10th Skanda's philosophical high point in these early chapters is the Brahma Vimohana Lila, the divine illusion of Brahma. Brahma stole the calves and cowherd boys who were Krishna's companions, hiding them in his realm to test whether Krishna was truly who the sage Narada had told him he was. Krishna looked around and found his friends gone. He, he then multiplied himself, becoming every single calf, every single boy. For an entire year, the mothers of Vrindavana nursed and loved children who were, in reality, Krishna himself. Their love, already extraordinary, became something beyond description, because it was, without their knowing it, love directed at Bhagavan in the form of their own children. When Brahma returned to see what had happened, he saw a vision that destroyed every concept in his vast creator's mind. He saw thousands of Krishnas, each complete, each real, each looking at him with gentle amusement. Brahma, who had created the universe, was himself created in that moment, properly understood for the first time. Chapter 27. Govardhana, the mountain on a finger. Every year, the people of Vrindavana performed a great sacrifice in honor of Indra, the king of the Devas and lord of rain. It was tradition. It was what their fathers had done and their fathers before them. Krishna watched the preparations and asked Nanda, his foster father, "Why do we worship Indra?" Nanda explained, "For rain, for the protection of the cattle, for the prosperity of the village." Krishna listened with that particular quality of attention that made whoever he was listening to feel completely seen, and then he said, "But it is the Govardhana hill that gives us our grass, and our cows who give us our milk, and our own efforts that sustain our life. Why do we worship someone who is simply doing his job rather than honoring what directly sustains us?" The village agreed. The worship was redirected to the Govardhana hill. Indra was furious. He unleashed the 7 great storm clouds, the Samvartaka clouds that are reserved for the dissolution of worlds, and they poured rain on Vrindavana. Not rain, but apocalypse, sheets of water, darkness at noon, lightning that struck the earth in continuous volleys, hail that shattered everything it touched. Krishna picked up the Govardhana mountain on the little finger of his left hand. He held it like an umbrella. "Come," he said to the people and animals of Vrindavana. "Come underneath." For 7 days and 7 nights, while the cosmic storm raged, all of Vrindavana stood sheltered under a mountain held up by a child. They did not fear. They ate, they sang, they cared for their animals. Some of the gopis could not stop looking at him, at his face completely calm, completely present, as if holding a mountain above the world with one finger was simply what one did when one's people needed protection. On the 7th day, Indra came down from the heavens. He bowed before Krishna. The pride of millennia dissolved in that bow. His celestial elephant Airavata's trunk touched Krishna's feet, and Indra, the king of heaven, received the teaching that even gods need, that true protection is not power, it is love. Chapter 28, The Rasa Lila, Love Beyond All Love. It was autumn. The moon was full over Vrindavana. The night was the color of sandalwood and jasmine, and Krishna put his flute to his lips. The sound that came from that flute is described in the Bhagavata with the vocabulary of every art form simultaneously. It was music, and it was a river, and it was a call, and it was a question, and it was an answer. It entered the ears of the gopis, the cowherd women of Vrindavana, and bypassed every social, familial, rational, and moral structure they had built around their hearts. They left whatever they were doing. They left cooking pots on the fire. They left sleeping children. They left husbands who tried to stop them and could not. They left, all of them, and ran toward the forest where the sound was coming from. What followed, the Rasa Lila, the circular dance of Krishna with the gopis, has been the subject of more poetry, more devotional commentary, more artistic interpretation than perhaps any single episode in all of human spiritual literature. The sages who heard Shuka narrate this were troubled by an obvious question. These were married women. They abandoned their dharmic duties. How can this be presented as the highest path? Shuka answered, what the gopis did was not adharma. It was the fulfillment of dharma at a level where social dharma is transcended. They did not go to a man, they went to Bhagavan. And there is no dharma higher than going to Bhagavan when he calls. During the dance, Krishna multiplied himself so that each gopi danced with her own Krishna, felt his hand in hers, his glance on her face, his presence complete and undivided. There was no jealousy because there was no division. And at the height of their happiness, he disappeared. He tested them. In the madness of separation, the gopis searched and found nothing. In their grief, they enacted his stories. One became the demon Putana, another became the river Yamuna. They had become so absorbed in Krishna that they had become him. The Rasa Lila teaches what no philosophical text can teach, that love of this quality, selfless, consuming, willing to abandon everything, is not weakness. It is the most powerful thing in the universe.